Welcome to Chisel Compass, where deep-rooted wisdom meets the crossroads of faith, entrepreneurship, and mindset. I'm the real Jason Duncan, and he's Dr. Justin Moseley, the Mindset Doctor. And we're here to help you refine your vision and navigate life's toughest challenges with purpose-driven strategies and real-world insights. Each episode, we're going to dive into faith-driven leadership, business growth, personal development, and the mindset shifts that drive lasting success. Now, whether you're building your business, enhancing your leadership skills, or pursuing personal growth, this podcast equips you with the tools and perspectives you need to lead with conviction and live with impact. This isn't just about where you're going, it's how you get there. So let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Chisel and Compass. When the plane went down, the survivors thought that they were stranded with nothing. But when they took an inventory, they realized they already had everything they needed to last, not because of what they had, but because of how they used it. That's the difference between resources and resourcefulness. Welcome back to another episode of Chisel and Compass. I'm one of your hosts. I am the real Jason Duncan, and he is
Dr. Justin Moseley,
the Mindset Doctor. And we're here today on Chisel and Compass to talk to you again about the intersection between faith, business, and mindset. And today we're going to be talking about this idea of resourcefulness. Neither of us, Justin nor I, grew up in a wealthy home. I think both of us grew up probably in I don't know much about his background other than what I assume, but middle-class homes, probably never had extravagant things, but we always had what we needed. And then there's other people that grew up in, as they say, with a silver spoon in their mouths and were given everything. And I remember hearing a guy, Eddie, Eddie's last name just totally. We were at the conference together, Justin. You and I were there at the conference, the Aspire conference. What's Eddie's last name? Wilson.
Oh, yeah,
Eddie Wilson. Yeah. Remember, he talked about this from stage. He grew up in a very wealthy family, and his dad taught him, because he said his dad didn't give him any money. He said, "You're going to have to learn how to be resourceful because it's not about my resources." So that was kind of the first time that I'd heard that pitched, which was back, I guess, in November last year. So, Justin, why do you think resourcefulness is more valuable than just having more resources in the first place?
Yeah, and it goes back to, I heard the quote from Tony Robbins years ago, and he said, people don't fail because of a lack of resources, they fail because of a lack of resourcefulness. And we see it all the time. Like when it comes to success, it's not about what you have, it's about what you do with it. How creative can you be with the resources that you do have, and then persistence and other things that come into play. And I was thinking about, like, when Courtney and I started our practice back in the day, we didn't have the resources. We didn't take out a loan and to cover 6 months of expenses as we're building this business. It was kind of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. We're burning the ships. We're going all in. And so we looked at, okay, if we don't have the main resources people look at, we got time and money. Well, yeah, we had the resource of time. We didn't have the money. So we have to make it happen. But what other resources are available to us? Well, there's people in the community that needed our help. We had a service that could help them. So what do? We got out in the community and started meeting people. So that was a resource that we took advantage of by being resourceful. We're like, okay, what connections can we make? And even very early on, we did what was called a dinner with the doc, where I took people out to dinner, and people in the community, I invited them out. And a lady who came to our dinner, she became a patient of ours and invited her pastor to come to the next dinner with the doc. And that pastor came, he loved it, became a patient, and invited us to do a workshop for his church. And all these connections started to build because of resourcefulness. Not saying like, hey, where can I find more money? Or I have a lack of money. That's usually the mindset people have is, well, I can't do it because I don't have the money, or I don't have the time, or I don't have the people. No. Who, and Grant Cardone says it, back in the day, he was like, who has my money was a mindset he had. Like, not, I don't have to have the money. Somebody out there has it. So for us, we were like, okay, we're going to do these community events and invite people to them. And because we invited them, they became patients and they started inviting other people. And then that pastor had us do workshops at his church, and hundreds of people started coming into our clinic, all because of us being resourceful and saying, what can we do? How can we get out and serve? By what the one thing we did have was a service and the time. And we used that service and the time resourcefully, by getting out there and making connections and doing these talks. And I'm curious for you when it comes to that, like personally, what are some times that you've had to be resourceful and not just rely on your resources?
Well, I'll start by finishing the context of the opening story that I alluded to, and then I'll answer that question. So there's a story told of a plane that goes down on a deserted island. And luckily, all of the passengers survived. Nobody was killed in the accident, but the plane was, of course, rendered useless. It couldn't fly again. They were on a small island, not connected with any way to communicate with the outside world. All the radios, and cell phones, nothing worked. So one of the people on the plane decided, look, we need to look at what we have. So they started opening up suitcases and finding, well, this suitcase had a whole bunch of rope in it. And they're like, well, why you got rope? And, well, I'm going on a climbing expedition, and I needed a rope for that. And then another suitcase was full of soap. It's because that guy was going to a convention for soap. Another person had first aid materials. Some people had some trail mix. Some people had bottles of water. Some people had other resources, blankets, etc. And what they discovered after going through that for a day is that they probably had enough resources to last on that deserted island for months comfortably before they were able to be saved. Now, that's a definition of being resourceful. It's doing this inventory of what's available to you. And I remember, the question you asked me back when I first started my lighting company back in 2010, 2011, I had to look at, I needed to make money. I didn't know how I was going to make money. I was an unemployed school teacher trying to figure out, well, what's my next step? And I did an inventory. Like, okay, what do I have? What can I do? Well, here's what I knew. I knew how to sell because I was a pretty good salesperson. I had been in the past in sales. I knew how to sell. I was also good at networking. I could find people, and had already started an LLC with another business partner at the time that, even though it wasn't doing what I thought would ultimately make money, it was already set up and we already had the structure in place. So I thought, okay, here's some resources I have available. How do I be resourceful with this? And I started figuring out, oh, well, what if I sold LED lighting through this current LLC? There's a way that we're going to be able to do this. Well, I don't have a place to store the lights. Oh, well, I've got a 12 by 24 shed in the backyard that I park my motorcycle in. Well, maybe I could just set the motorcycle outside and use that as my storage unit for all my lights. And at some point, I think I had like $25,000 worth of lights in the shed, which was not a good idea. So I moved it as soon as I could. But that's an example of just being resourceful. You're just figuring out, what do you have available to you and how can you leverage that to succeed? So when you look at founders who do succeed versus those who stall out, what role do you see in resourcefulness, or what role do you see resourcefulness playing in their growth?
Yeah, I think it's everything, because I look at looking at the people that you have. And at first you might have a small team, but as you build your team becomes part of your resourcefulness package here. Yes, they have abilities and skills, but they also, another way to be resourceful, let's say, like you mentioned, you were good at sales. For a lot of people out there, they look at, I'm not good at sales. So for them, that's not a resource. But in order to be resourceful, you can say, I'm not good at sales, but I can go into YouTube and start watching videos about sales, or I can hire a sales coach or buy this course, and I could actually become good at sales. So you can actually be resourceful by looking at, where am I lacking, and actually gain a skill and a talent and ability just by saying, okay, what do I lack and how do I get it? So I think a lot of people, they have the mindset where they're just stuck. Like, nope, I'm not good at sales. I can't speak. I can't do this. I can't do all these things. And they have the limited mindset, versus the successful ones are like, no, I understand my limits, but how do I overcome that? Do I learn the skill myself, or do I hire somebody that has the skill and they can do it? Do I hire the right salesperson? Do I hire a manager? Do I hire the marketing person who knows how to do this? And I think that's another level of resourcefulness, is hiring the right people to fill in the gaps. And I think about biblical principles too. There's a lot of resourcefulness in the Bible. You look at feeding the 5,000. They're all like, hey, we don't have enough food to feed these people. And Jesus is like, no, have everybody sit down. We're going to feed them. And they took the fish and the loaves and they fed the people. Or when the lame man asked for money, he was begging for money, and Peter was like, I'm not going to give you silver or gold, but in the name of Jesus, walk. Like he thought he wanted money, but really he got the best thing he could have, the ability to walk. And imagine if you were a lame beggar that couldn't walk and you get the ability to walk, that's a whole new level of resourcefulness you could be. And I think about Jesus telling the apostles to go out and like, don't take anything with you, that God's going to provide. And the people just showed up along the way that provided them food, they provided them shelter, all the things they needed, not because of something they already had, but because the resources are all around you. And I think that's one of the biggest mindset is you don't have to have the resources. The resources are all around you. How can you be resourceful enough to gather those?
And sometimes those resources are internal. I've heard this story told many, many times. I don't know how true it is specifically. I know that generally this is true, and I think everybody will know this as soon as I tell the story. But there's a story of two men who had very different lives. They were brothers. One of them was homeless. He was, he's an addict. He was offering no value to society, living on the streets. And another, the brother of the same family, was very successful. He had become pretty wealthy, relatively speaking, was doing well. He was a great addition to his community. He was providing good value back to the community. And somebody found out that these two guys were brothers, and they went and interviewed each of them. And they asked the brothers each individually, what made you this way? Why did you become so successful, or why did you become homeless and an addict? And their answer was exactly the same: because my dad beat me. And now look, I've not been in an abusive home. I'm not from one. I don't know what that's like, so I can't judge, but I can say that the resource or the resourcefulness that they took with what their experience was internally, they used it completely differently. One man looked at what happened to him. My dad beat me. He was mean to me. And that forced him from a mental mindset standpoint into looking at that as I am worthless. I don't have any worth. I'm just going to take the easiest path possible. The other man said, I'm not ever going to let that happen to me or anybody else in my life. I'm going to prove that my dad was not the greatest man, and I'm going to go be better than him. They both had the same experience, and they looked at it completely differently. And I think for us as entrepreneurs in business, I think we need to take that same view as the man who became successful, is to look at it and say, look, no matter what kind of crap sandwiches were delivered to you as you grew up, we have to get over it with
Yep.
proper sensitivity to people who've gone through things I've not gone through, but we got to get over it. We don't need to care about what happened in the past and decide that those are all moments that teach us and lead us to who we can become. And you can become homeless or you become successful with the same inputs.
Yeah. And this is kind of cool because we can bring it full circle, because that was a story that I shared at the Exeter Club a few years ago. And so shout out to the Exeter Club. It's a mastermind group that Jason runs. But that's also part of being resourceful, like surrounding yourself with people in a group that can discuss ideas. And think about the story he just told came from him hearing that story a couple years ago, and boom, he just pulled it out in a setting like this. That's resourcefulness, filling your minds with the right things. And I thought about it as you were saying that story too. The way I shared it, the point that I was making years ago when I said it was, nothing has meaning until we give it meaning. So the two kids in that story, one gave it a meaning that I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm worthless. Like he psychologically thought, because my dad was abusive to me, I must not be worth anything. And he started to believe that. And the other kid said, no, because of that, I'm not going to let anything stop me. Hey, it's going to make me tougher. I know what I went through. I can go out and face anything in this world if I can survive that. It's all the story we tell each other. And I think that's a perfect thing to tie into this podcast is, what story are you telling yourself right now? Are you telling yourself you have a lack of resources? If you don't shift that mindset, you'll never have the resources you need. You can take a account of what resources you do have and be like, yeah, this is what I have. This is what I have, but I'm not going to be limited by this. I'm going to, back to the story you told about the airplane. There was other people that took all their resources. We pulled them together. We can create something great. So do an inventory of your own resources. These are the talents, abilities, the skills I have, the time, the money. This is what it is, but it's not going to limit me from being successful. If I'm lacking in some area, there's resources around me. How can I find those other resources? That's by being resourceful.
Well, I think one of the things we could walk away this podcast with is to know that having more money, more people, or more tools doesn't guarantee success. What matters is how creatively you apply what's already in your hands. And no matter who you are, where you come from listening to this, there is really no excuse for you not being able to accomplish some measure of what anyone would refer to as success. Obviously, success has a million different definitions. It's as different as the person giving the definition. But there is no excuse. It doesn't matter if you grew up in a poor home. It doesn't matter if you're homeless now. It doesn't matter if you are a multimillionaire right now. What matters is how creatively you apply what's already in your hands. I think one of the things that we do here with Chisel and Compass as a podcast is our intent here is, as we said at the beginning, to talk about this intersection of faith, business, and mindset. But the idea is, what do we need to chisel away? What needs to get away so that the real us can be seen? And what compass are we using to measure where we're heading? Chisel and compass. That's the idea. Well, really, a lot of this deals with being resourceful. It's like, what is available? What do you have available? Do you have health? Do you have your friends? Do you have money? Do you have a talent that no one else has? Do you have access that no one else has? Do you have experiences that no one else has? What is it? How creatively are you applying what's already in your hands? So, Justin, can you think of a time in your business career where you or a client were forced to get resourceful? And did it actually turn out to be an advantage rather than a setback because you didn't have as much as other people had, but you made it work?
Yeah. And first, I'll think a mentor of mine told me a story years ago when we were first starting our business. So he said back when he first started, his mindset was, hey, if I could just make $100,000 a year, that would be amazing. And he acquired the resources and the talents to make $100,000 a year. And then he became more successful and he challenged himself. He said, what would I have to do and who would I have to become to make $100,000 a month? And then he started looking at his resources. He didn't have the resources to do that yet, but he got resourceful and he found the people and surrounded himself with the right people that gave him the mindset to be able to do it, because that's a whole shift. And he made $100,000 a month. And then he set a new challenge. He said, what would it take for me to make $100,000 in one day? And he figured out how to do it. And it didn't happen overnight. He didn't, again, have the resources, but he became resourceful and made that happen. And I mean, that's happened time and time again over the years. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I mean, I think the biggest one is just knowing when we first started, like I shared at the first of this podcast, is when we had nothing. Because it's easy to look at like I'm taking a risk and being resourceful in this area. But when we had nothing, when there was no money coming in, we just have to be resourceful. I think that's the biggest testimony is, man, it's out there. The resources are available. There's the people are available. And I look at now with the team that we've built, like it's a risk with any business, like hiring the right people and getting people in the right seat on the bus. Like it's tough to position people sometimes, but that is being resourceful, because sometimes it's, man, Courtney's been in the gym and this girl just had a certain personality and her attitude and her demeanor. And she just got an intuition. She was like, no, I need to go back in there and talk to her. And then she goes back in and talks to her and is like, hey, offers her a job right there on the spot. And she became an amazing employee. That's being resourceful. Like it wasn't putting a ad out and having the right people come in, which sometimes that's necessary. But sometimes it's resourceful of, man, this waitress is awesome. I need to hire her right now. So I think it's seeing the opportunities, which is a podcast we're going to do soon, is about the reticular activating system, talking about there's opportunity all around us if we tune our reticular activating system to find it. But there's been times from hiring employees to partnering with people to doing workshops and invited to different things to being able to do TED Talks. Like all these were resources that if I just looked at my own life and be like, I can't accomplish any of this. And I think that's as people of faith too. Like we believe like it's not us anyways. It's not because of us. It's in spite of us. But we know the Lord does bless us, and it's not just think about it and it's going to come in your hand. You got to ask, seek, and knock. Like you've got to ask for it. You've got to go seek it, and you got to knock on doors to make it happen. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to do all of the above to find the resources that are there.
You know, some of some of the best ideas are born when entrepreneurs face limits, and
Mm.
constraints actually force us to think differently. Barriers help us. We don't like barriers because they stand in our way. We look at them as barriers, but those constraints give us this pushback is what makes us strong. I mean, what is a weight? It is a barrier against gravity. And as if we continually push through and push against that weight, we become strong. So your lack of resources is a constraint that can actually lead to some amazing ideas. If you look at all of the great entrepreneurial innovations that have happened in the last 50 to 60 years, there was some sort of constraint, something that we couldn't do, that someone said, hey, let's figure out what resources we have available to make this work. How do we communicate wirelessly across the planet in instant?
Yeah.
How do we have cars that can drive themselves? How do we charge things wirelessly? Like, you guys, I mean, listen, do you know where we're heading with wireless electricity? Right now, my phone is on a magnet on my desk charging. It's not, it's only connected because it's sitting on something. We're heading to no wires. Like, that's going to be amazing.
Right.
But it's the constraint of the way we understand electricity right now that we're having to be resourceful. How do we push through this? In business, we're facing that now. So whether it's skills, people, networks, knowledge, whatever it is, here's what I want you to do. I want to encourage you, listener, to make an inventory of what you do have. What skills do you have? Spend a day, half a day, 4 hours, block off 4 hours, and do an inventory. What skills do you have available to yourself, in those who work with you or close to you, people you have access to? Justin and I are just good friends, and now we're doing a podcast together. He doesn't work for me. I don't work for him. We're in this together. We're using one another's skills to make this happen. What people do you have? Make an inventory of the people you know. You'll be amazed at how there's probably some people that can help you get what you want. What networks do you have access to? Think about your neighborhood, your church, your community. Maybe there's a mastermind group that you could grow or get into and grow. Is there a club you need to join? Where do you need to go? And what knowledge do you have? What do you know that other people maybe not know as easily as you know? And then once you get this inventory put together, then you need to ask yourself, how can I use this in a new way to move forward right now? How can I do that? This is a podcast that's based on belief in scripture in the Bible. And in Proverbs 12:27, I love the book of Proverbs. I read from it every day. Solomon writes this. He said, the lazy do not roast any game, but the diligent feed on the riches of the hunt. So what does that mean? Well, the lazy, even though they might kill it, even they might stumble against it, they're still not going to roast it. They're going to take the time to do it. It's not about having the resources to hunt, but it's about using them well, cooking the food, making sure it delivers what it's supposed to, the sustenance. That is resourcefulness.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about Tony Robbins years ago. He talked about the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions that you ask yourself. And I think he talked about you ask better questions, you're going to get better answers. So a great question I love to ask people, because a lot of times, like, I don't have the resources. So think about a goal you have, maybe in your business or personal life. I want to get to this, but you're starting to say, I can't. An easy thing to say is, well, what if I could? What would it look like if I could accomplish that? What would need to happen? Maybe it is looking at my network. Maybe there's somebody that I can have as an accountability partner. Maybe that's a starting point to make me actually follow through with taking action. But just give yourself time to pause and reflect and be like, you know what? What if it could happen? And Tony uses the thing all the time because he talks about gratitude. And a lot of people are so in a place like, oh, I just can't think of anything to be grateful for. Well, what if you could be grateful? What would that be like? And then they start to think of things they actually are grateful for. But one of the things that came to mind while you're talking about that, just like the wires and everything's wireless and the electricity and all the things that we have access to, we go back to King Solomon and all his riches. He didn't have a device that could call somebody or be on a Zoom or Riverside chat that me and Jason are on right now in two different cities on the same screen together talking. Like the technology we have, I was in 3 different cities in the last 3 weeks. And Solomon, back in their day, they had to take days worth of travel just to get somewhere. So when you're looking at your own inventory, realize how blessed and how wealthy you truly are. because you do have the resources, and then you have access to other people that have resources that you can combine with your own resources and make something great happen.
Bob Proctor used to say something like this. I'll butcher it. I'm not going to try to quote him, but this is the idea, is that the capacity to do what you really want to do is available to you right now, even if you don't know how to do it. Just like the capacity for manned flight was available the first day God said, let there be light. The capacity and the ability for there to be manned flight in the atmosphere, planes at 30,000 feet, that capacity was there, but it didn't become reality until many, 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 many years later. We had to go through the process of understanding what resources we had. So right now, Mr. or Mrs. Entrepreneur or business person or housewife or corporate executive, whoever you are listening, watching, whatever you're doing right now, the capacity to accomplish what it is you want to accomplish exists. It's just a matter of lining up the resources, being resourceful with those resources, and you could accomplish just about anything you set your mind to. Justin, got any final words before we sign off on today's episode of Chisel and Compass?
Yeah, just the last example, kind of tying this all together. I think the great example of what can happen when you put your mind to something in the capacity is Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile. For years, no one thought anybody could ever break the 4-minute mile. And he did it in May of 1954, I believe. He breaks the 4-minute mile, something that's was there for decades. And then within months, all these other people started breaking it. Why? Because their capacity believed, you know what, if it's possible for him, it's possible for me. And I think that's a great principle in business. If somebody else can do it, you can do it. You just realize they didn't have more resources than you. Maybe they were just more resourceful. So it's time for you to be resourceful with what you have.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of Chisel and Compass. Every week or so, we're trying to bring you some information. Hopefully it's helpful as a businessman, entrepreneur, as someone interested in mindset, as someone interested in faith. We're trying to bring all three of these things to a good, interesting show. If you have a show idea, you can reach out to us at chiselandcompass.com, chiselandcompass.com. You can also follow me. I'm The Real Jason Duncan on Instagram and YouTube, The Real Jason Duncan. And I'll let Justin tell how to get in touch with him.
Best way, Instagram at Dr. Justin Moseley or drjustinmoseley.com.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, I am The Real Jason Duncan. He is
the Mindset Doctor, Dr. Justin Moseley.
And Jesus is King. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on Chisel and Compass for today. For show notes, resources, and more, hit up chiselandcompass.com and follow us on social media. You can find me at The Real Jason Duncan, and you can find Justin at Dr. Justin Moseley. Until next time, keep your chisel sharp, your compass true, and never stop building what matters. This is Chisel and Compass.